Okay, time to actually get the generator working. So we've done a couple videos of getting the generator installed and doing the prep on the cubicle and working on the cabinet and doing the mounts, doing the starter bracket. So there's been lots of things to get the generator kind of in place and ready to be a generator, but we need to actually get it hooked up. So it needs battery connection to the starter. It needs a new control board. It will need an oil change. We'll wait on that for a little bit, probably just to make sure it's working and running. It needs to have the house wiring that goes from the generator itself into the basically the plug-in cubicle area where you would plug in your shore power. So all of that has basically been removed in our case. And so I need to hook all of those up. Oh, also needs a fuel line. So it doesn't have a fuel line going to it right now. So we've got the generator all installed, but in order to get back to the back of the cabinet to do the wiring and the fuel line and things like that, I need to take the generator out. And so I've got the motorcycle hydraulic jack that I used before, and basically we'll put this underneath the generator. We'll be able to support it while we unbolt everything and then roll it out of the way while we work in there. I've got most of my parts. I don't know if I have everything, but I'll show you some of what I've got here. So we need to install a new electrical box in the back of the cabinet because ours doesn't have one. All of this was taken out when we got the coach. This was just a storage area. So I need to install a new electrical box. I've got 3/4 inch conduit that will go into this electrical box and then run through the cubicle area up to the plug-in where you have your shore power plug. So this runs that house wiring from the box up to the plug. We've got some 1/2 inch conduit that'll come out the other side of this box and go up to the generator itself. We've got a oil filter. We've got fuel line. So I've got 1/4 inch fuel line. This is Gates Barricade fuel line that says that it's resistant against ethanol. And so I figure this will be good. I don't know that this will be enough. I've got 5 feet of this, so there'll be lots more details as we get into it. And then I've also got a new control board. Our control board was not working and looked like it had been physically damaged, and so we're going to replace that. This one is from Flight Systems. They're one of the couple of places to get this control board, and it looked like a good source. So I think those are the main pieces that we'll start working on, but first thing to do is take this off, get it moved out of the way so that I can start working on things inside of the cabinet area. All right, so I've been doing a little research on what the inside of this cabinet should look like, and so I've been labeling things because we had to start basically from scratch with this. We don't have any of the grommets or connectors or anything like that. We have salvaged a few pieces from some of the places we got parts, but just looking at pictures that I've taken of other generators installed and getting an idea of what the setup should look like. It looks like the electrical box goes back here in the corner, and there are a couple of bolt holes right there that this can bolt down to, so that looks pretty promising. The electrical wiring from the coach and the shore power plug will come around the back of the cubicle and go into the back of this. And then from the front, it will go out to the generator. There is a battery ground point, and so that comes from the house batteries that are on the other side of kind of the back of the generator there. And the ground comes over and has a ground point on this chassis, so I'll need to work up a way to ground it there. It looks like the fuel line normally comes through right here, and so I got a small pass-through like you'd use on a firewall or something that I can screw into this and then have a barb fitting on the top and a barb fitting on the bottom. And I can run the fuel line from the tank over to the bottom of this, and then the fuel line for the generator from the top of it over kind of on this side to the fuel pump on the generator. There's the positive battery cable that goes to the starter, and it comes from the battery compartment back there, goes what appears to be underneath this, and then comes up through this hole right here. And there needs to be a grommet around that because you want to make sure that that positive battery cable doesn't short out against this housing because it's grounded over here. So I need to get a grommet for that, and a battery cable long enough to run from the house batteries over there up through this and then up to the starter on the generator itself. I didn't really see any kind of connection or disconnect in the pictures that I took, so I don't know if there is a mounting point or some place that battery cable to the starter should have. I'm probably just going to use a one-piece cable that goes that whole distance. There's also a ground point here, so there's a cable that goes from the back of the generator kind of housing, and then comes around and gets grounded right here. So we've got the generator itself is grounded. All right, and there's two holes back here that are normally a bracket that would include a couple of grommets and would be strain relief. So it's bolted down here, and then this positive battery cable goes through it, and this ground cable goes through it, and then those go back up to the generator. So I think it is important to have some strain relief here. I don't have that bracket that would normally be there, so I'll need to work up some kind of strain relief that I can attach here that will take these two cables in a way that I don't have to worry about them chafing or shorting out, but it will provide that strain relief so as the generator moves in and out, there's a place that we don't have it just pulling on this mount point or through this hole here. So that's what I'm thinking for how to attach things. Okay, so time to work on the conduit that goes from the shore power box on the side of the coach back through the body and into the cabinet where the generator is. And so I got it all removed. Here in a minute I'll show kind of where it came from and how I got it out and things like that. But now that we've got it out, what we had was a couple of cut pieces of wire and conduit. So got the old pieces here of conduit and wire, and they've been cut. So I got a new piece of conduit. I'm reusing the 50 amp plug and the box and things, but I'm actually got a wiring cable, so like this one that was cut from a parts coach. So I'm able to use, and it was in really good condition, I'm using the same kind of cable basically that came out of another coach, running it through the new conduit. It has kind of an interesting setup because there are two cables that run through the conduit, but on the end where it connects to the receptacle itself, it basically is spliced into 4 wires. And so because this is a 50 amp receptacle, we have these 4 wires here, neutral and hot. And so it's kind of nice that I'm able to find the original wiring so I don't have to build my own wire at the end there, which I guess probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it's nice to be able to use something that we've already got. So we've got the receptacle, we've got the box, we've got the conduit with the wire running through it. And so the next thing is to basically kind of feed this through the body where it came out and get the conduit run from the inside of that cabinet to the generator area. All right, so from behind the range, where we can get a little bit of access to one side of that electrical kind of box on the outside of the coach, we have the electrical panels and everything inside the coach right here, and we can't really get access behind it because there's a wall on the back of this cabinet. And now we can see this is the water inlet from the outside, and right next to it is the electrical cabinet. And so we can kind of see this side of it here. The conduit runs from the socket on the far side underneath and through these little metal grippy things, and then down right here at the edge of this and into the, we can kind of shine the light down there, but it goes down and then goes through the fiberglass into the generator cubicle on the outside of the coach. And so this gives us pretty good access to running the conduit from the plug all the way down into the generator cabinet. So that's what we've got to do next. All right, so we got this outlet in, and we had to take the range out to be able to feed the conduit in from behind the range, down underneath this area here on the inside, down behind the closet, and then out the side here. You can see the conduit coming out, wrapping around where it'll go over to the box on the far side. That was a pretty big job. It took probably an hour just by itself to do that piece of it. And we had 3 people, so kind of working our way through, feeding, wiggling. So definitely not a real easy thing to do. I can't really think of a better way to do it. It's the only way I can think that you would be able to feed that whole conduit through. So the overall cable length in the conduit is roughly 9 feet probably. And so had to feed quite a bit of that through. But in the end, we got it all wired up. We've now got our outlet here wired, so we can plug our cable into that. Actually, it's already plugged in. And so now from this part of it and the wiring into the coach, we're good. We now need to work down here on this side. So come around, and we've got the conduit coming in here. It's coming back here to this electrical box. I'm going to work on that a bit. I have these wires right here, which are the control wires that come from the control panel up inside the coach. And I'm going to wire in basically a trailer hitch wiring system into this. I've seen some other people do that. It gives you basically a connector back at the back of the coach or back at the generator for these control wires, and seems like a reasonable way to do it. There is a connector on the back of the generator that we got, but because these wires are cut off, I don't have the other side of the connector, so I can't repair that. I got some wiring diagrams from online. I basically just searched around and found, you can find these on the GMC International website or B-Dub's website. And this shows the generator starter switch inside. And what's interesting here is it shows wires 1, 2, 3, and 6. And those are the wires that come into the generator itself. And it also tells us the color. So we've got tan, we've got light green, we've got pink, and we've got dark blue, which are the colors that we have coming out over here. So now I know out of these colors which one is number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 6. So that will help me as I wire this up and have my connectors connected into the generator, which then runs to the control board with the numbered wiring there. So I'm going to work on splicing these together. I'll do a little heat shrink on them, and then we'll have our control wiring set up. Okay, time for a little update on how things are going here. So as I've been wiring, I've realized that I don't think I want to wire it exactly the way it probably was originally. As I looked at it, this hole in the back here is actually the positive battery connection. And so the battery comes in to the top, and then it's insulated through the hole, and a cable comes off the bottom and up through this, through the strain relief, and then up to the generator. And I think what I'm going to do is just run the cable around the back. This is the ground that I am going to attach here to the frame, but I'm going to run the positive around the back from the circuit breaker that it normally attaches to, and then just directly up to the back of the generator. And I think I won't have any problem with it kind of hanging down too much or binding, because it's going to come through the grommet in the back and then just go right up to the back of the generator. So I think I'm going to skip that complexity of running it underneath the case and insulating and all of that. I've also found that getting this wired in, I think, is going to work pretty well. I've wired that mating connector to the back of the generator, so that's going to work. I've got my conduit set up here to run into the box, and then I'll connect this to the output on the generator. I am going to ground the generator right here. So this is a threaded hole that the ground wire coming off the back of the generator will ground to this. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we've got going on the back of the generator here. So we've got all this bundle of wires coming off, and I've been working on getting them set up to connect inside of the cubicle. And I've got the ground wire here, so pretty straightforward. That's gonna be a good length. I'm gonna basically connect that inside the cabinet, and so that's gonna be okay. I ended up replacing this. This is now the battery cable that will come off of the circuit breaker, basically, and run to the starter so that we can start it. And I added a longer cable here because I'm not going to terminate it in the cabinet. I'm going to run it around to the circuit breaker. So I've got a longer cable here that I can add on. And then I've got the control wiring, and basically just wired in this connector so that I still have the connections for the 4 control wires. The thing that I haven't done yet is this one. So this was cut off when the generator was removed from whatever coach it came out of before, and this is the output for the generator. And so this needs to go, I'll have the metal conduit here, it will go to the electrical box inside of the cabinet, but I need to do something about what I'm going on here, and it's kind of frayed here. I don't know what's going on with this nut and bolt thing. So I think I'm probably just going to replace all of this wiring. So I got some new wiring. I got 6 gauge. So one of these is heavier than the other 2. There's 3 wires in this. So I got some 6 and 8 gauge, number 6, number 8, to replace those. And I'm going to figure out how to wire this in both places, where it's coming off the circuit breaker here and where it's coming off the winding of the generator, and see if I can just get some better wiring to where it needs to go back to that electrical box. Okay, and I've got the chassis ground here that I'm going to connect back here in the back where it's out of the way. So I'll have chassis ground, generator ground, the box here for the generator output, and the control cables. And I think I'll have everything work pretty well. I think I'll be okay on my cable management back here. So I have this conduit that I'll run out of the box for the generator output, which will be connected to this on the other side of the box. And then everything else will be kind of running in the top of the generator. As it slides back, it should hang back there a little bit, but not down too far. I am still going to run the fuel line through this, which is the typical spot. I've got a little pass-through that I'll put through there with barb fittings on it. So getting pretty close on all of our wiring, but I decided to deviate a little bit from my original plan and the way I think it was originally set up. All right, so let's talk about what's happening inside of the cubicle here. So we got the fuel line fitting set up, and I had planned to run it through this hole right here because this is the one that the positive battery connection should be at, but the firewall or bulkhead pass-through that I got wouldn't fit in this hole, and it did fit in this one. So I decided to put it here instead, since I wasn't using this as that positive battery connection. And then I got a couple of barbed fittings, one on the top, one on the bottom for the line coming over from the fuel tank. And that turned out really well. I like that. And then back here in these connections here in the electrical box, from a parts coach, it came with these nice copper lugs for each of these, and so I was able to clamp the appropriate wires together. I had to test the wires going through the conduit here to make sure that I was connecting white to the right one and black to the correct one. And then I'll wrap these in a little bit of electrical tape, and then I also have these nice covers for them to basically make sure that they don't short out to the box. And then I'll wrap all of that in a little bit of electrical tape just to make sure that it's well insulated, put it all into the box there. And that pretty much takes care of things between the positive battery cable, the ground, those electrical AC connections, and the fuel. And that's about all that we need to have done back here. Okay, so we're getting close, and it's time to actually test it and see if it runs. So we've got the generator connected up close to the coach here. I have connected the ground wire. I have also connected the battery power cable around to the circuit breaker over there by the house batteries. And I have attached the fuel line. So we now have our pass through here to bring the fuel line up from the tank through this housing and into the fuel line. Now, as I put things together, assuming it starts and runs and all of that, I'll need to do a little cable management, hose management, wire management. I think probably this control cable is going to be a little long, so I may need to coil that and kind of attach it in the back. But since I've got battery, ground, and fuel, I can push the start button and see what happens. So we'll give that a shot. All right, so it runs, and it runs really well. So pretty excited about that. The other thing that we wanted to check, because we weren't sure when we got this if it was going to make power, is power. So as long as the engine's running, we can basically test to see if it's putting out 120 volts. The rating is 123 volts with no load on it. And so here are the output wires from the generator itself. And one of these is basically the neutral or ground, and it runs through my conduit and will be wired in back there. This other wire is the hot wire, and it goes through this circuit breaker and then goes to these white wires that I installed, and then again goes down the conduit and connects to the box in the back of the cabinet. So what I need to do is basically test across this. I don't want to turn on the circuit breaker yet because I don't know if the circuit breaker is good or bad. And so I basically hooked my multimeter to the end of this neutral ground wire and then probed here on this side of the circuit breaker where this other wire connects and tested, and we're getting 120 volts. So it's making power. So that was our kind of last big check. It runs and it makes power. So we can start wiring in the actual AC into the coach. So when I wire it in, up at the electrical box, there are 2 white wires and 2 black wires. The black wires need to be connected to this wire coming off the circuit breaker. And so it's hard to tell which is which on this end where the box is. So I'm going to need to do a little bit of testing to see which wire coming from the socket is the black and which one is the white. And then I'll know which ways to connect these wires here, and I'll be able to make those connections back at the AC electrical box at the back of the cubicle. Then we'll make our remote start connections, which we did test when it was running, and we can start and stop it from inside the coach. So it looks like my wiring is correct here. So a few more things to do, but we're getting very close. Okay, so we've got everything hooked up. We got all the wiring done. We had to do a little cable management because I didn't hook things up just exactly the way they were with the strain relief and things like that. I ended up needing to just make sure that things were routed around the back of the generator. It turns out the back of the generator here, when it's all the way in, is only about maybe 1.5 inches off of the back wall. So I had to make sure that all my conduit and control wiring and everything were out of the way. But it's working. We can turn it on and off. The fuel line is run. It is generating power. So I've got the circuit breaker on now. And so if I start this up, we've got power in the coach. We've run the air conditioner. We've charged the batteries. And it's getting power just the way it should. The voltage range when it loads up versus when it doesn't have a load is right where it should. It's running very smooth, so we're really happy with how the generator is running. And we've had to do just a little bit of kind of cleanup things. So I've got the muffler installed, but I needed a new muffler gasket. Also, there'd been a modification to the muffler because we were getting used parts for all of this. Somebody had made some changes to the muffler in the past, so we had to adjust that a little bit. A few bolts had stripped out, so I replaced those. Other than some maintenance things, we still need to do an oil change and some little things like that. I think this project is all done.